I am excited to have Mike Walsh come on the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast. And I'm excited because Mike is going to be a return keynote speaker at the NAED National Conference, which is coming up May 23rd through 25th, Marco Island, Florida. We're going to get into how you can register and go to it anyway. But Mike's a return guy. He was with us in 2019. He keynoted an event for us. Now he's keynoting again. And thanks a ton for coming on the podcast. Thanks a ton for being our keynote speaker again. And there's so much we have to go into because so much has changed since 2019. So, Mike, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. And, I feel very fortunate because in some ways it's like I've been at the bookends of the world ending and the world being recreated in the last 3 years. It's been a roller coaster ride. I just regret one thing. If I made so many predictions when I saw everyone in 2019. I think if I give people a heads up about the pandemic, that would have been a little bit more useful.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Would have been impossible, but yeah, it probably would have been. But I want to get into that in a second. First, let's get into some of the credentials, if that's okay. Because again,
Okay.
you're the CEO of Tomorrow, which is an innovation consultancy firm. You're an expert in future trends. You're an expert in emerging markets. So we know about that stuff. I want to get into that. But one of the things as I went to your website to check you out is you refer to yourself as a global nomad, which I think is fantastic. What a great description. Because you travel the world and you're searching for the best business ideas out there. So, there's some credibility to what it is that you're going to be talking about with us at the national meeting. So get into, I guess, the process that you go through, again, to gather all of these best practices so that you're able to translate these things when you come to the national meeting in May.
Well, it's a great question, Scott. And I think a lot of it for me comes down to the fact that I think it's very easy to get trapped into these hype cycles on Twitter and on blogs, especially that are very centric to, the North American market. And the best way to really understand where change is happening, not just at a technological level, but how it's impacting people's businesses and lives and industries, I think is actually to go into the market. So I spent a lot of time, as you said, in different global markets, not just in the United States and Europe, but in Asia. I was just in Japan, looking at industrial robotics a couple of weeks ago, talking to people that are building these new technologies. And I think what I'm really looking for is not just what's coming next, but how people are going to implement this in practical ways to grow and transform their organizations. And for me, that's much more of a cultural issue often in translating those things than actually just a scientific or technological one.
So let's go through that a little bit. Because again, you spoke to us in 2019 about emerging markets and things that were going to happen. And it was sort of like again, you joked about if you'd have been able to, predict the pandemic. It was sort of one of those, here's what we're looking at, sort of that world of, hey, it's 2020, it's time to reassess where are we going to be in 2020, 2030. But the reality is we needed to be there in 2021. So it really compressed, our time frame from 10 and a half years to 1.5 years, 18 months, basically. So when you see these things in other countries, you talk about robotics and things like this in other countries, how are they continuing to grasp moving into the future and tackling these emerging opportunities?
I think the big thing that everyone's facing now is how do you operationalize these ideas? And, when I spoke to the group in 2019, the big theme even then was around digital transformation. The mistake is that we all thought we had a 10-year runway on this. And, even talking about things now, which seems ridiculous to be taking time on, like, e-commerce, electronic signatures, and sort of a more seamless understanding from a data perspective of your customers and segmentation. Even that people thought they had a long time. Pandemic hits, we can't work in the normal ways. And suddenly, your digital transformation plan becomes a plan for survival. And that forcing function, I think, has been this really immersive experience for leaders in many traditional areas like construction and distribution, logistics. And I think now that we've been through that, I really believe people are much more open to asking, well, what can we now really do with technology? How far should we go on this journey? Is that enough? And what I'm going to really be trying to share is this idea that, we've now had a taste of what's possible. Now is a good time to be asking the question, what can we now do that we couldn't have done before?
Interesting. Okay, so, and we heard a lot, I'm going to putting words in your mouth, but we always heard a lot about back pre-pandemic about the removal of friction. Is the digital transformation done that, and now we have to move toward, I guess, other objectives? Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think a big part of the, like, let's say the first phase of digital transformation was actually just like lubricating the systems, and as you say, eliminating friction, but also just eliminating unnecessary steps. And I think even to this day, there's some element of people taking information or an order or an invoice out of a system, they print it to a piece of paper, they sit around, look at it, then give it to somebody else, and then re-uploads it back into the system. And we kind of call that digitally transforming a process. It isn't, until you sat back and go, how do we rethink this through and through to maybe take people out of the loop and have systems talking to each other and algorithms that are learning from this. So that's still a journey that a lot of us are undergoing. But there's something more interesting that's happening now, and I would say now, and even in the last 3 months, with the rise of AI and smarter algorithms and machine learning systems, people are now asking themselves, well, okay, should we be looking at this process entirely in a completely new way? If we really understand what's driving demand from our customers, if we can actually predict what they're likely to need next, how do we almost start to anticipate that and build that into our supply chains and our ordering systems, so that it sort of flows through automatically? And once you can do that, it's really a very different type of business opportunity.
Right. I think that's the elephant in the room that I wanted to get into, was the AI part. Again, traveling the world, looking at a lot of business systems and a lot of, again, emerging markets, things like that. Give me your thoughts on AI, I suppose. We'll start at the basics there. Is it, for lack of a better term, is it a necessary evil? Is it something that it's like, look, we're going to get to the point where we have the haves and the have-nots, and it's just kind of time to be a have. Tell me where we're at, where you see us at this stage of the game, and then I have some follow-ups from there.
Okay, look, it's such a big question, and I think I've got mixed feelings in that. In the old days, I would have to spend a good 10 minutes trying to convince everyone why AI was important, and ChatGPT since December last year has done most of that work for me. Yeah. But it's a mixed blessing, because in some ways that glitzy side of artificial intelligence, where you have these magical devices that are almost like genies that can answer questions for you, right? Is actually not the lived experience that most of the leaders in this community are going to be applying AI to their businesses. Sure, you can build a website or an app that has some AI that can answer questions to people on there. Fantastic. I'm not stopping anyone from doing that. But much more profound is if you can find a way to build data, algorithms, automation, and artificial intelligence into your operating model, so it transforms the speed and the intelligence by which you make good decisions at scale. That is when you're starting to see, something that's going to be really transformative, to the future of your organization. And that's what excites me, I think from a pragmatic standpoint.
So, okay, we're going to stay down this path a little bit of AI. Is there still value, the way you see it, is there still value in, again, again, what you call the experience of being in the business for 25 or 30 years, instead of just, I think, this sort of weird general fear of, I'm just going to hand everything over to a computer and it's going to make all of the decisions for me.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the biggest trends you're going to see in the next 6 months is not so much people using these publicly available things from, like ChatGPT. It's organizations and industries and ecosystems training these AIs on their own proprietary data sets, right? So think about all of the experience and knowledge you've accumulated over the last 30 years, everything you know about your customers, everything you know about the way the industry works. What if you could use that to fine-tune models that were able to then, with incredible precision and speed, automate some of those key decisions, allow you to anticipate shifts in the market, optimize your supply chains, your distribution systems, your back-end accounts receivable. So really, that knowledge you have becomes the secret sauce that allows you to build your own proprietary machine learning systems. And I know that sounds like science fiction, like you need to be like Elon Musk and go hire a bunch of AI engineers to do it. Really, it's not the case. these systems will be easily available via Microsoft, from Google, and it'll be part of what you do when you're thinking about your IT strategy in the next 18 months.
Okay, so let's get into the people part of it then. Because have you recognized this again, traveling the world, being the global nomad? Yes, I can get data from AI, but at the end of the day, there's still sort of that people side of it that says, yeah, I see what it says on this piece of paper, but I'm not sure I believe it. How do you sort of integrate the two? I suppose if there is such a way of doing it, either saying we have to, one, trust the data, or two, we have to create some kind of a mixture. I mean, what have you recognized to try and marry this up?
Look, the cultural side of integrating emerging technologies and your business practices is sort of not a symptom of problems. It is the problem. It is the challenge. It is the digital transformation challenge. And I think part of the solution is finding a new kind of person, a new kind of leader that you want to attract to your organization, someone that can walk that path between understanding human complexity, understanding your culture, understanding your customers, and also understanding the new systems and technologies and platforms that allow you to do things in new ways. And really, that hybrid skill set are the kinds of people you need to attract. And what I think would surprise a lot of the people who are going to come and watch this session is actually, these aren't just necessarily young people. You would be shocked at the number of people who've been around for a long time, who may not be necessarily very technical, who I think are really going to embrace these new ways of working, because they don't require programming skills. They don't require you to understand Python or R or statistics. A lot of it is just common sense. Like, how do we leverage the things that we know and automate them at scale?
Are there people that I'm working with right now who are further along down again this AI, again, sort of this
Absolutely.
digital but they're not tapped into, which is what scares me.
Let me give you a simple example. There are people right today who are running meetings differently to everybody else. So they're sitting down having a strategy discussion about what to do. These people are not hiring a big consulting firm to come and give them answers. They haven't got their, strategy team running projections and building PowerPoints or Excel models. They literally just have a computer open with one of these generative AI platforms, and they're writing clever prompts to basically start discussions. And it's not that these, whatever these computers are telling them is then the presentation that they then give. It's a starting point for a very meaningful human-driven conversation about what the organization should do for the next quarter or the next 6 months or the next 10 years. But the starting point's like 10 steps ahead than where you would have been 6 months ago, And I think for me, whether you're talking about people in the distribution business or any other kind of leadership role, this input from technology is not a threat. It's just, it shifts the kind of the base skill set, because the value of doing the generic data gathering and sort of market sizing is trending to zero, because now these systems can do it for us.
But there's still value in your coworkers, your employees, your upper and middle management in terms of being able to harness that data. So it's not a complete replacement. Like, again,
no, it's just that the starting line is now 10 steps ahead, right? Right. So as long as we all start 10 steps ahead, right, we're now playing a new game. But if you're still 10 steps behind, doing things that machines can now do for you, I mean, at some level, you're not just being conservative and, obstinate. You're actually just wasting unnecessary time.
So the important part then is flash forward ourselves to 2027 as we're now looking really closely at 2030. Where are we in that 10 steps? Do we need to be 35 steps ahead? Like, where is this taking us down the road?
Absolutely. And I think that's a question that we don't just ask in 2023 in May. It's a question we have to ask ourselves every day, because it's an evolving boundary line between tools and humanity. In 2019, I brought out my book, The Algorithmic Leader: How to Be Smart when machines are smarter than you. And to some extent, I anticipated some of these things that are happening today. I didn't think it would happen so quickly. But the basic premise of that is that, being smart is actually knowing where you need to actually augment your capabilities, where the value of what is human and what is machine, how that boundary is shifting. And you've always just got to be in step with that, right? You don't want to be the person using your hands when everyone's using hammers. You don't want to be the person, trying to weave cloth when people are using a loom. Once again, you don't want to be the person sitting there with Excel and bits of paper when people are now on generative AI platforms and high levels of sophisticated data-driven automation.
That is a great point. That's a great way to put it, actually. I appreciate you putting it that way. But let's get to the end user. Again, our customers. We talked a lot during this podcast. I talk a lot in the magazine and other stuff just about, hey, we need to do this stuff because it's how you run your business and it's digital transformation. And again, AI, it's also all these, you have to do this. But we don't really talk about, because here's the benefit for the customer. So tell me, what's the benefit to the customer and how are they going to understand that you've taken on a digital transformation, which has actually led to better outcomes for them?
Well, I think during the pandemic, when we embraced a lot of these like phase one digital technologies, the big payoff for customers was convenience and transparency. So, they actually, it turned out, often it is actually just easier ordering things without seeing somebody physically, right? And I think a lot of people were shocked on that because they said, listen, we pride ourselves on relationships and we want to go and sit down and have a cup of coffee and take the order. No, people are just actually happy doing something in a highly automated way. And that was actually a better experience. But I think where we're going to see the next level of value to the customer is where we can start to use these systems to anticipate needs, so we're actually ahead of what people want before they even know it. And then the next step along that is just completely autonomous connections between customers and suppliers and distributors. So it becomes this highly connected ecosystem. And, especially for the larger customers in this industry, like there's so much wasted in the site mismanagement, with inflation driving the cost of inputs and projects. Anything we can do to make that whole thing more seamless, I think is going to build incredible loyalty, with the customer base.
And that's how it all kind of falls together. So I'm gonna close this by giving you a quick warning. You probably don't even realize it, but you have a really distinctive look to you. Maybe you didn't recognize that, but I have a filter. I have a feeling you're going to do your presentation again at NAED's national meeting. And I hope you're not overbooked because some folks are going to catch you in a lobby, in a hallway, and something outside the general session room. And I'm sure they're going to have more questions or at least just continue the conversation.
My pleasure.
It's a fascinating topic. And I can't tell you again how excited I am that you're going to keynote, one of the sessions there at the NAED national meeting. And I'm excited that you're coming back. And Mike Walsh, again, who's the CEO of Tomorrow. Really excited to have you come and join us. And I'm really thrilled that you took the time today to join me on the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast. So thanks a ton for giving us this preview and giving us kind of this view of the landscape from your view, which is really spectacular. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, great. Well, listen, stay tuned for just 1 second. Again, I need to tell folks about the national meeting. A reminder, it is May 23 through 25, Marco Island, Florida. There's still plenty of time for you to register. It's only April. You can go to www.naed.org/national-meeting to still register. Join us. We got 3 full days of stuff. We got Mike Walsh. We got Beach Olympics, a whole bunch going on, stuff you're going to meet with do some networking with your partners. You definitely want to do that. And if you have questions about the national meeting or anything else going on related to TED Magazine, as always, 2 ways you can track me down. You can give me a phone call, 314-812-5311. You can send me an email, scosta, SCOSTA @NAED.org. Give me some thoughts, some feedback on anything you see going on out there. I'd love to hear from you guys till we get a chance to talk again. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast.